Hello and welcome to our Voices in Montessori podcast, brought to you by the Greenspring Center for Lifelong Learning. Please subscribe to our podcast so that we can continue to support your important work. As Dr. Montessori said, an education capable of saving humanity is no small undertaking. We agree, so let's get to work. I'm Tamara Sheasley-Ballas, and in today's episode, we're talking about Montessori for Aging and Dementia and how this movement is changing care for elders. My guests today are Mandy, Cheskis, and Margaret Jarrell. Mandy has over 30 years of professional experience working as a speech-language pathologist with elders living in their homes, in skilled nursing facilities, and assisted living and personal care settings. She has a master's degree in speech-language pathology and is recognized as a master clinician in cognitive communication deficits. Mandy is a certified trainer in Montessori for Aging and Dementia through AMI and serves as a project manager for Brush Development. Margaret has over 20 years of experience in Montessori. She was first a Montessori student, then a Montessori elementary guide and administrator, and is also a Montessori mom. Margaret currently serves as the director of the Greenspring Center for Lifelong Learning. She has a master's degree in education, her elementary Montessori certification, and is an AMI trainer in Montessori for Aging and Dementia. Welcome, Mandy and Margaret. So excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so we're going to dig right in here. So help us understand why is Montessori pedagogy important? Why is it important that we bring this to seniors and to really senior centers?
I love that question. It's more important than ever that we consider other options than what's happening right now in long-term care, especially in America, but we're seeing this all over the globe, that we are letting our elders just exist. I have worked for over 30 years in long-term care communities and assisted living and personal care and home care, and I see elders literally just sit there and exist all day without any stimulation, with minimal stimulation. Just picture a nursing home in America. And I can tell you, it doesn't matter if it's a 5-star, beautiful community that has marble floors in the entryway when you come in, or a place that should be shut down by the state. I see the same thing no matter where I go. I see people lined up in wheelchairs, sitting in front of a television, not even watching the TV, asleep. I see people sitting in front of a window, again, just sitting there asleep. I also see people herded from one group activity to another. So caregivers are giving care with the assumption that people can't do anything anymore for themselves. So the people living there are really just this vessel of care, the recipient of the care, and they're almost deemed useless. And the caregiver comes in and says, I'm going to get you washed and dressed. I'm going to make sure you eat something. And then I'm going to herd you to this group activity, whether you want to go or not. And then I'm going to herd you to the next group activity until we have another meal. And that's really the rhythm of their day. And we know that's not acceptable. That's not how we want to live our lives. We want to continue living our lives with purpose and meaning and dignity. And that's why Montessori is such a beautiful philosophy of living for all ages, but especially for our elders. It has animated me to make a difference throughout the world in helping communities adopt this philosophy of living, to really change to a person-centered approach. And it's making a difference, allowing people to truly live and thrive with meaning and purpose, doing the things that they used to do when they were living at home, and even learning new things, whether they have a cognitive impairment or not. So I love this approach. I feel this philosophy of living is much needed, And we are at the exciting beginning stages of Montessori philosophy for elders. And I'm really thrilled that you asked me to be here to talk about it.
Well, I have to tell you that one of the things as you were speaking, I was thinking about is it's a representation on our society, how we treat those who can't care for themselves as much. And it comes in with children and it comes in with elders. And we really have to look at ourselves and as a community and say, what is acceptable? What's okay? Are we willing to have these people who have contributed so much to the world just because they're in this elder state? Now they don't get to be treated really with that dignity and that humanity. So I'm so excited to have you both here and to get to talk about this more. So can you talk about the impact of using Montessori and the Montessori approach with older adults and people, even people living with dementia and cognitive needs?
What we do with our elders sometimes is we strip away everything that makes them human, and we expect them to conform to all the rules and the schedule and the activities that the staff and the long-term care community decides. All of their choice is taken away from them. All of their personhood is taken away from them. So we want to flip that. Margaret and I are working really hard to flip that whole scenario to become more person-centered, where we truly get to know each person as a person. And don't we want that for ourselves? I hope that when I'm in my 90s and living with dementia somewhere, that someone brings me dark chocolate, red wine, and some Scrabble tiles. Because even if I can't make words anymore with the Scrabble tiles, I guarantee you I will be at peace. I might stack them up into different towers or sort them by letters, but I will be very much at peace because that's something that I love to do. So that's in general, it's about knowing the person deeply as an individual, and then really finding ways where we can engage them in multisensory activities and roles that are meaningful to them.
Tamara, what's so exciting about this is that, yes, Mandy and other professionals are having these experiences one by one. Now there's finally starting to be a growing body of research about the impact of Montessori for elder people and those living with dementia. And the studies are having very significant results showing increased engagement in people living with dementia, decreases in anxiety and depression, similar to the story that Mandy just told, but amazingly, even less use of psychotropic medications being necessary in many of these communities. The other exciting piece is that it actually increases staff satisfaction and reduces staff turnover. And Mandy can speak to the crisis in staffing in long-term care, but that's incredibly important right now.
Wow.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's amazing to really have the research back up, because we've all had moments where we've seen the beauty of Montessori, and really that's a Montessori story. You're looking at the person as an individual, you're individuating, you're looking to see what it is that's going to feed their spirit, their soul as an individual. You're providing something that's small and requires a lot of attention and thought. It just beautiful, beautiful. And I love that there's research to show this, that this actually works. So can you all briefly share with us how Montessori for Aging and Dementia actually got started?
Sure. In 2014, there was a body of individuals, of professionals and experts around the globe that came together. So again, this is just 10 years old. So in that time, they developed standards and guidelines to and coursework so that we could help guide and train professionals to really make these changes in long-term care. We really want to shift things from the one-size-fits-all model of activities, like I was talking about, everybody, it's time to all go to bingo or all go to sing-along, which are two very popular group activities, but it doesn't mean that everybody wants to go all the time, okay? So we want to create environments that have beautiful prepared environments based on the people who are living there so that they can engage with materials and activities just like they do at home. And the key word that I just said is home. Nobody wants to live in a hospital environment or an institutional environment. So I thought when I asked the people I train and do classes with, I asked them, does anybody want to live in a nursing home? And nobody raises their hand. So along with this movement in training people to think differently, we're trying to design or redesign the communities themselves. So originally, long-term care communities were built like mini hospitals. And all of us want to go to a hospital when we have an acute issue, when we have a broken arm, or we have, God forbid, a heart attack or something. That's where we want to be. But we want to get treated and we want to go home. Those hospitals they're not, they're purposely not made to feel like home because they want to treat people and send them back home, right? That's not a place for long term. So we knew that the hospital model doesn't really work. I'll tell you very sadly that the majority of the long-term care skilled nursing facilities still look institutional and look like hospitals with long hallways and big nurses stations, and they're still doing things that feels very institutional, like coming around with a hydration card at 10 and 2. You know, this is not home, right? The next shift in thinking was to move from the hospital model to the hotel and resort model. And while we all would love to go to a hotel and maybe take a vacation for, you know, a couple weeks and be waited on. So while we all enjoy being pampered, we want to be in a place that looks and feels like home. So it's challenging when you're creating environments for multiple people to live when we all have such different homes. So we need to truly get to know each individual, what they used to like to do at home, what they might be interested in now. And there are some general things that we know through research that make communities feel more home-like. Having spaces for quiet time and reading. We all have that in our home, nice quiet spaces. We have little nooks and spaces if we enjoy music or if we enjoy art. So we're trying to create some spaces in the prepared environment that we want people to come to and to take advantage of any time of the day, just like you would when you're at home. So really the model is moving away from that institutional setting, moving away from that hotel setting and that resort setting, because very often in that beautiful lobby that looks so nice, like as if you're walking into a hotel, there's nothing to do. You have these beautiful big spaces with, you know, large chairs for sitting in and a nice table in between with some beautiful silk flower arrangement. There's nothing for people to do but just sit and exist in those beautiful hotel-like spaces also. So really, we want people to feel as if they're in a home-like environment. And many of our communities are changing the language that they're using as well, so that they're not calling their places nursing homes, or they're changing the language to call them households, and they're really trying to use a household model. And all the research really supports this because even they found in dining, for example, that people who sit together with the care partners and sit family style with enhanced lighting in the dining room actually eat more, as opposed to the institutional model where they come and give people food on trays. Who wants to eat their food on trays, right? So there has been some movement and shift. It has been slow, but that's the direction that we're moving.
Beautiful. And it sounds like it's very person-centered, individual-centered, and really fits with the Montessori model because, right, children's house, Montessori children's house. And as Montessori would have wanted us to think about, how do we take care of these people? So let's talk about some of the key features that Montessori for children and adults share. Margaret, you wanted to take this one?
Yes, and as Mandy was describing the shift from a medical model to a hotel model, you nailed it. I mean, that is where the current best practice lies, is in a person-centered model. And that's why this is such a beautiful marriage with Montessori, because the Montessori style of education is child-centered, and this care for elders is adult-centered, it's person-centered. And even though, yes, we sometimes use Montessori materials with older adults, and we'll talk a little bit about that, I see this real whole movement as more of an adoption of the philosophy of living. So just like the classroom that Dr. Montessori named Casa dei Bambini, it's the home of the children, the long-term care community or the memory care community should really be the home of the elders. So this impacts the prepared environment deeply, in that when we have the luxury to design Montessori communities for older adults, we're not building long hallways with nurses' stations. We're creating rooms that feed off of a central living space, that have areas for activity and a communal kitchen and access to the outdoors, which sounds obvious, and yet that is radical in a lot of long-term care communities. Free flow in and out. So when we're preparing the environment, we want to take out all the things that look medical and institutional as much as possible and have it be the elder's home. Just like in the classroom, how we have materials and activities available at all times, same thing for the elders. Activities shouldn't be in one room at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock and brought out of locked cabinets. There should be things for people to do all the time. And they can involve care of self, care of others, care of the community, just like in our Montessori classrooms. So in a beautifully run Montessori community for elders, we see older adults dusting and making their beds and watering the plants and filling the bird feeder and preparing a meal and making coffee and working shoulder to shoulder with care partners. And by the way, we've renamed staff and even the term caregiver. We prefer to use the term care partner, because really care partners are working shoulder to shoulder, living in a community together, rather than one being the giver of care and the other the passive recipient, like Mandy was talking about. Mm-hmm. So the real Montessori community for elders should look like, there should be a free flow of the day. So we actually want to bring back choice to older adults so that they can wake when they want to. Some people are early risers. Some people are late risers. Some people want to eat breakfast. Some people just want coffee and read the newspaper till noon. We need to actually find out what people's preferences are and then find a way to honor those, instead of keeping them on these artificial routines that are for the convenience of the staff. So the free flow has to do with people waking and eating whenever they're ready, flowing into things that they're interested in, either individually or in small groups, literally flowing in and out outdoors as they wish to freely. And then there can still be group activities. It's not that those are bad, but they're sprinkled in and among this lively, bustling community where there's something going on all the time, and there's freedom of movement and choice and independence, which is just a totally different model than your more traditional care model. But it's the Montessori brought to life.
Wow, it sounds amazing. It really does. And I think a piece of it is really acknowledging that these folks still need that connection. They still need that love. And so often it can be in an institution setting, there's such a separateness, and there's not a sense of belonging. There's not a sense of I matter here. And what does it look like for us to create care environments and homes for people who need the support? They can't live on their own anymore. They don't have those skills, but where they still have that love and that connection and that real sense of themselves. You don't want them to lose that. It sounds like this model really honors that. Love that.
Absolutely. And the medical model is so cold and stark, and very often the CNAs who get the least amount of training but yet have to do the most amount of interaction with the people, the elders who are living there, they're told things like, someone just moved in, the person in 105A has a broken hip, and that's all they know about the person. Well, guess what? That person has lived a whole long life, and has a very dynamic personality, and has her own preferences and rhythm and routine to her life. And that's a very sad way to start a relationship. It's very hard to build a rapport with someone especially if they have a cognitive impairment. So one of the things that Dr. Maria Montessori taught was to follow the child. We apply that to follow the elder, like truly get to know them as a person and then follow their lead. So I think it applies to everything we do, what the leisure activities they do, as well as the activities of daily living and the self-care. So we want to focus on what people still can do, even in a shower situation. Maybe they can't do shower clean their back, but they might be able to still hold a washcloth and wash their face. They will have opinions on the water temperature. They will have preferences on what time of day they'd like to shower. Try to give people that dignity and allow them to continue to do all that they can, and assist them so that they can continue to do it. If they don't do it, they're going to lose it. So with children, we're teaching them skills. With adults, with elders, we're trying to maintain those skills. And we don't want to strip that away from them. And we make many assumptions about what children and what elders can and cannot do. And we know with Montessori that when we empower them, children can do a lot of things with real materials, child size. Well, we want the elders to continue to do all those things that they did at home. So I just wanted to jump in there with that.
Well, I appreciate that. And that leads to the next question, which is what sort of activities are appropriate for people who have cognitive needs in this way?
Well, and what I love about this model that's based on a deep knowing of the person is that it is extremely important that we actually take the time to get to know each person's history and personality and preferences and likes and hobbies and interests. And so that gets built in to the process. If we're talking about someone moving into a memory care community, for example, we're going to spend a lot of time with that individual. Now, very often in a typical admissions process, the family's given a packet of questions to fill out, and they fill out the person's profession and the names of their children and grandchildren, but it's surface level. That's about all you get to. So our type of assessment has to do with sitting down over multiple sessions with the person, the individual, and using family members too to fill in some pieces, but really compiling a very, very complete history profile. It involves observing conversationally what the person is still capable of, physically what the person is still capable of, and what supports are needed, We do a reading screening to see actually if they're still able to process what they're reading. And reading is a preserved ability through the course of most of dementia. So we can use that to our advantage. We find out what font size they need. I mean, we find out when they want to wake up, what their favorite food is, what they like to wear, all of it. And then we create what's called a meaningful engagement plan, where we actually design a personalized plan for that person that involves, yes, daily care and activities of daily living, but also activities and roles that we think the person will still enjoy.
Mm.
So activity-wise, I can give you a few examples, and this is all based on the person. I worked with an elder who had been a knitter all her life and a master knitter. And that was something that she didn't have access to in her care community. So brought knitting needles and yarn back in. She was so delighted to just feel those textures again, have those knitting needles in her hand. And many people living with dementia still maintain a lot of their procedural memory or their motor memory. That's very different from declarative memory, which is impacted early on in the course of dementia. People might forget names and facts and details, but things you've been doing all your life, like riding a bike or knitting without even thinking, those skills are retained for a long, long time. So this woman was able to enjoy knitting again, like Mandy described, drew a crowd. People were coming over. Not everyone who joined in had the motor memory for knitting or even the manual dexterity for it, but a group was able to gather and have conversation. One person was rolling skeins of yarn, the other was sorting the yarn by color. There was conversation happening, and this little knitting circle emerges. And that's the kind of thing that you can create, but only when you know what someone's passions are and what someone's experiences are. So we can build those kinds of experiences, but we can also find ways where elders can contribute to the community and take on roles that are something they could do daily even. What is amazing about people living with dementia is that they can learn a new routine through practice, even if they don't remember the practice session. So they may have no memory of having practice, but if you're consistent with the practice, they can build the new skill. So if, as care partners, we invite a group to fold warm towels every morning right after breakfast, eventually that becomes automatic and we get a group together and suddenly we're all participating in the life of the household together. So that's how we use those personalized assessments to build our plans. Now we can have the best of intentions and have something fall flat. You know, we might invite an elder to do something and they're not into it, you know, or and so this, we think of it as like an ever evolving thing. You know, we're constantly coming up with new ideas. We're observing to see what elders are enjoying, where they're engaged, what modifications they might need to help them be more independent with that activity. And then we are responding and making modifications to the environment or our plans based on those observations. So the same way we observe scientifically in a Montessori classroom, we've brought that component to the care community as well. And it becomes absolutely essential part of daily care is that people are observing elders and making notes of how to better meet their needs.
Mm, that's so beautiful. Can you give us a few more examples of things that we may not think about for our elders that could make a difference?
I can. I would love to say how much the elders love the nomenclature cards. At first glance, I get a lot of pushback when I introduce that from the staff. They say, oh, that's too childlike. It's only a word here or there. But then when we provide nomenclature cards, 3-part cards on a topic that the elder is interested in, number one, you're working on maintaining their language skills. Number two, they may sit there and talk to you about the vegetables they're growing in their garden or their favorite vegetable soup. And I've taught staff how to make their own materials so that if someone likes a particular sports team, let's say the New York Giants, and they follow that football team and that's their thing, that we can make cards either for sorting or matching, having to do with football, right? So again, it's following their interest. And it's a little bit different. We still demonstrate the way you would in a classroom by having them watch our hands but they may need more repetition, and it's more about engagement. So sometimes it turns into a whole conversation. The elders really aren't doing it wrong. They can explore different ways to use the materials, and we're happy to re-demonstrate the intended way to do the material, but we're also very happy if they're trying and kind of inventing different ways to use the materials. It's about engagement. So some of the Montessori materials we've used involved sorting, matching, language use, like I mentioned, the 3-part cards, also lacing, to maintain that fine motor skills, whether it's basic lacing or we're actually using some of the dressing frames, or sometimes somebody's still doing embroidery, like Margaret had said, with modifications. Perhaps they need the needle pre-threaded. And again, all of that is done with trial and error. And once we figure out what the person needs, we write that up in their engagement plan so that anyone, even a volunteer who's coming to visit, has a place to start. And that engagement plan is dynamic. It's going to change as the person's needs change and their interests change. But again, it's like, I think of it as a substitute plan, like a place to start if you're walking in and you don't know this person. So there's always an engagement plan on everyone based on the deep assessment. But some of our popular activities could be sorting buttons, could be using the bolt board and a screwdriver. That's an amazing activity that works on fine motor skills and attention to task. And I find that a lot of the women enjoy doing it as much as the men. And we use the metal insets with our elders. I'm trying to think of some of the classic Montessori materials, but very often we create some of our own materials. And there are 2 other differences that I want to highlight when you're working with elders. Elders are not going to elders with dementia are not necessarily going to take that initiative to just go and grab something off the shelf. So we create high contrast invitation signs because, like Margaret said, reading is a preserved skill that literally invite the person, help us keep our home clean, or, please help us complete this puzzle, or, please sort the cards. So this will literally invite the person to start the activity. It also acts as a reminder. So if they forget what they're doing midway, it'll help them self-cue. So that's one thing. The other, and we create those with heavy contrast. So all of our signage is high contrast, and with large print based on our reading screening. So that's really important. And we also want to avoid glare. So we want to make sure that any material that we use, including laminated cards, are done with a matte finish and not a shiny glare, because glare makes it really difficult for aging eyes to be able to read what's on we avoid anything with glass. We take glass out of frames, not for safety reasons that the glass may break, but because it just makes it really hard to read. So I would say one more thing I want to say about activities. In the current model that's happening in most nursing homes, it's a lot of very frontal back and forth activities. So what I mean by that is a leader may say some proverbs or some sayings and say the beginning, and the rest of the group will answer. So they may say, the apple doesn't fall far from the, and everybody answers the tree. Or the leader might say, that's the way the cookie, and everybody chimes in, crumbles. That's all well and good. It's a wonderful activity to be able to call up that vocabulary and to have that back and forth in a group setting. But why don't we take those skills and create some manipulatives? So when I work with communities, I'll encourage them to create manipulatives that have those same things, beginning and ends of song lyrics, matching, I don't know, to a team member to the team, or the team to the state. Or, have on one block, that's the way, and have on another block, the cookie crumbles, and create things that could be put in the environment that's not just call and response, that they can go to at any time. And we also make sure that all of our materials have a control of error, so they can do it independently and check and see if they've done it correctly. So they don't necessarily need someone to sit there with them to let them know if they're doing it right. And I think the Montessori materials are beautiful. They, just like in a classroom, we start with simple and concrete, and we move to more abstract, and we follow the elders' interests and everything that's put into the environment. So it's small changes that have a very big impact.
Wow. Sounds like a whole different way of thinking.
That's exactly what I wanted to say, Tamara, is because when we bring this philosophy into an existing care community, it requires a huge culture change. And it's not because anyone working there doesn't have the best of intentions. They do. People who choose to do this for a living are caring and giving and loving and selfless, or they wouldn't be in it. But it's just the way so many of them were trained, is to either think about people's deficits and, medicating or remediating them, or being of service, and this can be cultural too, because in some cultures, the way you show love to elders is by taking care of them. And so a lot of education, re-education, and retraining has to happen to change the culture, so that now care partners are thinking, wait a second, whatever I'm doing right now, could an elder be doing this instead of me? And we actually cross-train, not just nurses, not just, a lot of people think, oh, this is an activities thing. Montessori is during activities time, and we train the activities professional. It is not. We train dining staff, maintenance staff, housekeeping staff, the nurses, the med techs, everybody, activities. And that way, when someone is coming from housekeeping with that load of fresh, warm towels, they walk into the living area and invite a group of elders to help them fold. And someone is preparing for dinner, and instead of doing everything, they're inviting someone to come over and see if they'd like to help squeeze oranges for the orange juice or chop fruit. I was observing in a care community that was in the process of making this shift. They'd even already had the training, and I watched one elder walk up to a dining room partner and say, "What can I do? Can I help?" And that staff member said, "Oh, I got this, honey. You just relax. Don't worry about it. I've got it." And she had the best of intentions, but what a missed opportunity. Like, that elder wanted to be involved in the kitchen. And so we actually have to help care partners understand that is their new role. And sometimes their work takes longer, and it's not done as well, and it's not as efficient, and it's not, they don't get to check the box as quickly, but it is what the role of the care partner becomes in a Montessori care community, because we want them to slow down and take that time and really just welcome elders into the life of all those routines.
Absolutely. I love that example, Margaret, because that happens all the time. But I hear it all day long. Just sit down, go sit down. We're so worried about keeping people safe from falling. We're making them sit longer and actually putting them at risk for more falls. The longer people sit and don't move, the greater chance they're going to fall because their muscles will atrophy. So it's really important that we allow people to do all that they can and then some. And I love your example about helping in the dining room. Another example could be the maintenance man is coming in with his ladder and he's going to change a light bulb, and he walks into memory care with the ladder, and a gentleman who lives there comes up and says, "What you doing?" And the old way of thinking is, "Oh, I've got it. Go sit down." But the new way of thinking is, with the Montessori approaches, noticing that this person's interested and saying, "Oh, I'm changing the light bulb. Would you mind passing me the light bulb when I get up there?" I mean, you're not having the person with Alzheimer's necessarily climb up the ladder or do anything crazy. You're just involving them. And this may seem so simple, but it's very it's very radical and different. It's a big change for the people who are working, because they feel like, I have my things to do, and it's so siloed. It's like us and them. And we're trying to close that gap and say, we're all people here. Let's all get to know each other as individuals. You know, this person used to change many light bulbs at home. And, you know, we've had people helping to sand a bench and to help, you know, paint that bench that's going to be outside. We have people helping with a variety of things. So I think we can show that it works, but it really is a culture shift for everyone. And I tell people to, as they're walking around throughout their day, not only think, could an elder help me with this, but is there anybody just sitting around doing nothing that you could easily engage? You know, when they walk up and down the hallways of their care community, if they see a piece of trash on the ground, they know it's the expectation as an employee there that they bend down and pick it up, whether they work in maintenance or housekeeping or whatever. I want them to use that same lens of, we are all responsible for one another, and that we are here to help people stay engaged, keep them living with purpose and with meaning. And sometimes it just takes 3 seconds. So this is a very short story. So there are two women that were sitting in the dining room 45 minutes after the meal was over. And they're sitting in their wheelchairs, and they literally had nothing to do. There was no staff around, there were no materials, and they didn't even converse with one another. They were just staring at each other. They didn't even know how to initiate a conversation. And I went up to them and I said, "Ooh, this table is a little bit sticky. Would you mind helping me wipe it down?" And the woman said, "Oh, sure, I'd love to help." I gave her a sponge that's one of those Dolby sponges that are you know, that you can really feel, and it was brightly colored and it was textured. And I gave her a spray bottle that just had water in it. Well, would you know, she started going to town in her wheelchair, wiping down the table, which we know is so great for her range of motion, her sense of purpose. And she said, "Can you move my wheelchair over there so I could get the other side of the table?" And the other woman said, "I want to help too." And next thing you know, somebody who was ambulatory walked in and started wiping down the counters. Okay. This, which seems so mundane to many of us, like, you know, that we wouldn't even ask them. We have such a concierge type of serving community model that's happening right now. People are paying big money to live here, so why would they be helping with dusting or wiping down the table? And we're trying to make a shift in thinking that, yes, of course, there's going to be housekeeping and people, but that's not what this is about. This is about having people to continue to contribute and continue living, instead of just being existing and cared for. So I just wanted to throw that story out there too.
A great story. Such a great representation of people overall. People want to be purposeful. It's when we lose our purpose, then really our quality of life diminishes significantly. So Okay, so let's talk about the role of the care partner and really what their purpose is in these communities.
I can talk a little bit about that. We know that the Montessori triad includes the prepared environment, the prepared adult, and then the learner. So we can convert that same model just so easily. It's still a prepared environment, still a prepared adult, this time the care partner, and of course it's the elder or person living with dementia instead of the child. But it's a very similar role to that prepared adult in education. Just like we call our teachers guides, similarly, we want to think of our care partners as guides in the elder care community. So first and foremost, they are modeling grace and courtesy at all times. We tend not to give grace and courtesy lessons, but modeling that grace and courtesy becomes so important. And this is another place where we often need to see some culture change happen because many times staff in long-term care communities have fallen into some bad habits of speaking to someone who's sitting in a wheelchair from above, or speaking to them from behind their head, or moving them in a wheelchair before letting them know what's about to happen. And so even just practicing those basic tenets that of Montessori grace and courtesy, like making sure you make eye contact with someone and you're at eye level. If someone's in a wheelchair, that means you're either kneeling down or you're sitting in a chair adjacent to them to have a conversation. Speaking to them by their preferred name, finding out what their preferred name is and speaking to them. Sometimes care partners think that it shows affection to call people sweetie and honey, but what we counsel is that it is much more respectful to actually find out what that person wants to be called and call them by that name. So all of those little pieces of grace and courtesy, those care partners are responsible for setting that tone of peace and calm and respect for people at all times. It's also really key that they take the time to get to know all of the people in the community, because that's how they're cued in to what invitations that they can issue. So just like as a guide, we might invite a child to a lesson, care partners are constantly looking around for someone who needs engagement and inviting them into an activity or inviting them into a role that they might enjoy. But sometimes it just takes a minute just to, like Mandy said, just to invite the person and put the sponge in their hand. And, they don't need supervising the whole time they're wiping those tables. That care partner can be moving on and talking to another elder and getting them started on something while the other group is washing the tables. But taking the time to stop and notice and invite people, that's the role of the care partner. And when we say care partner, again, not just activities professional, every single member of that staff. And then, as I mentioned earlier, observation becomes hugely important because as we, first of all, will demonstrate a new task to someone. And when we're working with people with cognitive impairment, we want to employ something called task breakdown. So we break that task into simpler steps and might demonstrate just one step at a time and have an elder repeat after us. But then it's very important that we watch and see if they're able to be independent with that or whether they need additional modifications. They could need the activity simplified, or it could be it's too easy. I've had that experience too, where I thought something was going to be a good match and it was just way too simple for the person. It was beneath their dignity, and so I had to stretch and make it more complex for them. Or they might need a visual cue, and so that observation and making modifications is another role of that care partner that takes some practice, but really does involve also a lot of just common sense and following your instincts.
Well, it is amazing. This is fascinating. I really knew nothing about this, and I feel like you all have done such a beautiful job of giving us a picture of why it's important and the impact it can have, and a little bit about how we can do it. I have one more question, and then I want to make sure that we also tell people how they can learn more, because we're offering a 2-day workshop through the Greenspring Center. So I'll have you all talk about that. But before we go there, what are some of the ways that Montessorians can get involved in this movement?
There are lots of exciting ways. So what's exciting to think about is that Montessorians already have the skill set that they need to bring this philosophy of care to older adults. You don't necessarily need to have had Mandy's extensive background and expertise in dementia care in order to give the gifts of Montessori. So one way that a Montessorian can get involved is to support someone who's still living in the home setting. And when you're working with someone in the home setting, you'll look at the environment and you'll make some simple modifications like decluttering, labeling drawers and cabinets, designing a few activities and roles for them, working with their loved ones and educating them about how they can implement some aspects of this philosophy. So that can be a tremendous gift to someone who's in the earlier stages of cognitive decline, still living at home, and can benefit from just having some simple modifications made in the home environment. Mandy, do you want to talk about volunteering opportunities?
Oh, we need volunteers more than ever in long-term care, especially because there's been such a bad staffing crisis ever since COVID. We're in so much need of volunteers, and especially if you're a Montessorian, like, you're the perfect volunteer because you already have so much training that's applicable. And you already possess, based on your training, this person-centered approach that is what we need. So if you have the opportunity to volunteer, please volunteer at a care community. Please volunteer to visit an elder at home and use some of the same things that you're doing in the classroom could help someone living at home. So the bottom line is every one of us can help bring out the best in each person to really help people maintain that personhood. Help keep them doing the things that are familiar and the things that are multisensory and that will help keep stimulating their brain, whether that's polishing the shoes, folding the laundry, or rolling the silverware, or setting the table. So whether it's the home setting or whether it's in a care community, we need you. We need people who understand Montessori, because you understand the value of the whole person, of someone maintaining their personhood and being person-centered. We need you so badly.
There's one more really cool way that Montessorians can get involved, and this would be a topic of a whole other conversation, but it's designing intergenerational programming. So as Montessorians, we have the gift of access to children and all the knowledge that brings. If we can partner with a care community or elders living at home and design a way for them to work together, it's a gift to both groups. And I'll just say one thing, which is that so often when we think we're doing something intergenerational, it involves a group of children singing or giving a performance or baking something or making cards and delivering them to the care home. But a true intergenerational experience matches children and elders together with consistency over time so that they can build relationships with each other and doing engaging activities that both groups are enjoying. And there's so much more we could talk about there, but there's great opportunity. There's research on this too that shows that intergenerational experiences increase engagement and reduce depression in elders, yes, but they also destigmatize aging for children. And it allows them to continue to benefit from the wisdom of elders in an age and culture where they don't always have access to their grandparents or other elders. So that's a really, really great way that Montessorians can contribute as well.
Well, it's so beautiful and such important work. Thank you both for doing this work. It's such a beautiful outpouring of what Montessori created so long ago. It really a beautiful demonstration of these principles and really bringing them to a whole new population. Thank you, thank you. Margaret, do you want to tell us a little bit about the workshop you're going to be teaching?
Yes, so Mandy and I will be in Baltimore, Maryland in July doing a 2-day introductory workshop in this philosophy, Montessori for Aging and Dementia. It's a 12-hour course. It is actually the prerequisite to the practitioner's course that enables someone to earn their practitioner's certificate in Montessori for Aging and Dementia. Both the 12-hour workshop and the practitioner's course are eligible for certificates through AMI and also brush development. So if you are someone who's interested in dipping a toe and learning more, the 12-hour workshop is appropriate for Montessori educators who are interested in learning more, long-term care professionals, health professionals, family caregivers, really anyone who has a connection to someone living with dementia can gain from this 12-hour workshop. And then people can decide if they want to delve deeper afterwards. But we'd love to see you because this is in person, which is such a treat for us. We often give this workshop via Zoom and it's just not the same. So it's such a treat to be at a Montessori school with the materials. We're going to be hands-on, practicing, role-playing. It's a really fun couple of days. So we hope you will join us.
Well, thank you. And thank you both for your work. And thank you both for your time today. This was such an interesting conversation. I have to tell you, it just makes me want to start a home for elders. I mean, really, like it calls to my spirit in that way. And I'm sure there are others that are feeling the same way. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, absolutely our pleasure. And I just want to say to our listeners, thank you all so much for spending your time with us today. Take a look at our website, greenspringcenter.org, to view the show notes from today's episode. Information about the workshop Mandy and Margaret are giving here at Greenspring in July is included in the show notes. And we will also include several websites you can go to learn more if you'd like to delve deeper on your own. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast and hear the latest episodes and to join in the conversation on both Facebook and Instagram. The work you do is so important. I think it's the most important, and we're here to help. Join us next time. Thanks for being here.